Good afternoon, dear friends. I'm very happy to welcome everyone. We are opening the Finopolis, starting to debate one of the most hot topics, the artificial intelligence. Its application makes somebody delightful, some fear for their existential future, but one should say that the traditional AI, since long, has been applied and has become more available. Chatbot, voice assistants have become an inextricable part of our everyday life. And the financial sector, which is very much quick to accept many new things, is starting to use AI in assessing the creditworthiness of the borrowers and combating the fraudsters and being used for anti-fraud technologies. I remember that at one of the previous Finopolis we were talking about the AI, saying that most probably it would take on some routine functions while human beings will be left free to create. But we've watched how, over the past 2 years, the development of AI technologies has been picking up almost at an explosive pace. A generative intellect has come to be, which creates various contents, helps to compose music and develop various program codes. But I should say that in the meantime, this generative AI is the privilege of tech leaders. In this country, these are such as Yandex and Sber and some others who have such systems, but nevertheless, we do note that life is not standing still at that. There is a lot of scientific debate over the future being the realm for AI or an autonomous AI. And some are saying that this is like the thread of Ariana, which leads us into a bright future. But others are saying that this is almost a wolf wearing a sheepskin to cover himself. But I want to say that this could be a basic technology applied in a broad context of various industry that you can compare with a steam engine, with computers, with things that made up the foundation of the technological revolution. And so today we would like to discuss what that might mean for ordinary people, for the households, for businesses, for the government, and what one should do to make sure that the AI leads to a common good rather than to a serfdom for humanity. We're having Maksut Shadaev, who is the Minister of Digital Development, on the panel with us today. Sergei Sobyanin, the Mayor of Moscow. Herman Gref, Chairman of the Board of Sberbank, Andrey, Kostin, the President and the Chairman of the Board of Bank, and Vladimir Verkhoshinskiy, who is the Alfa-Bank's Senior Manager. Indeed, new technologies bring challenges, raise a lot of issues. We are aware that AI also wants to eat. It consumes big data, and so the question of big data and its availability becomes the key one for the development of AI. Questions are being asked about the future of competition. Shouldn't we be worried that monopolies will emerge, the kind of tech leaders who will be able to promote and apply technologies only for their good? What will happen to intellectual property rights? Should one seriously consider the ethical boundaries for AI to be used? What will happen to workplaces, to individual trades and occupations? So there are quite a few issues, and one of the key ones is how one should regulate such technologies. Almost a few days before the forum, the central bank published its advisory report on AI for public consultations and debate, and that was where we raised issues about what needs to be done, how one should regulate the application of AI in the financial industry, and whether one should regulate it. And that is what we're going to discuss with the market players. And one should mention that many countries are going through such similar debates. You've heard about the OECD principles for the application of AI. Recently, G7 also published the guiding principles and the code of ethics for the developers of AI. And as far as the Bank of Russia is concerned, being aware that AI contains risk, and we're always thinking about risk, but nevertheless, we are not intending to go against the AI with sword and fire. We're going to try and look for the golden middle in order to create the stimulus for the development of this technology, but similarly protect the citizens from the risks that may ensue and use the so-called risk-based approach. But we also believe that there are certain risks that the market itself will be able to cope with through self-regulation, through certain ethos. In some areas, rigid regulation should be applied, but we also believe that it should be introduced only after a thorough analysis of the risk and after consulting the market players. And so I think that we are going to debate all these issues with the government. And so my first question is to Maksut Igorevich. You are in charge of introducing AI into the government services. There is already Robot Max there in the public governance, and the Ministry of Digital Development has set up the Department for AI and the Big Data. Well, I hope that after the department is fully set up, it will really skyrocket. And we also heard that the government recently held a strategic session dedicated to AI, and it has plans to update the national AI development strategy. So my question is, which are the industries that you are going to concentrate the application of AI? Hopefully the fin sector is one of them as one of the leaders. And how do you intend to solve the issues that many are asking with the computational capacities and the academic base that is required to develop such technology? Well, thank you very much. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Indeed, very recently we held a strategic session, which is the kind of a format when various leaders of different government agencies and the chairman of the cabinet and big businesses convene, and we discuss the priorities of the development of different sectors, what should be the regulation governing it. And so we've held such a big session recently where we very seriously discussed the consequences of the introduction of AI and what needs to be done about it. I can tell you that the focus which the government has identified is in the first place related to the implementation, because we feel that we need to follow in the wake of the financial sector, which traditionally has been a locomotive. In many areas we are lagging behind in the meantime, and so in this sense our strategic session discussed the priority measures of how we should expedite the implementation of AI. You put it very correctly. The main issue was about creating the data sets, which is the feeding ground for the AI to learn, to be effectively used. In terms of different industries, we've set up the following priorities. Healthcare, in the first place, education, then safety and security, where AI is already broadly applied, and certainly, in a broad sense, the public service areas, which are various interfaces, call centers, in a way so as to provide for the most agile format of interacting with the citizens. At the same time, we've set ourselves very ambitious goals and indicators, and I believe that the next cycle is going to be dedicated to the implementation of AI. And most importantly, the decision was made that the government big data factory is going to be established, where the data sets are going to be collected in the first place on the basis of the already existing data in the government, and secondly, the data that the government is going to receive from the businesses on certain terms. And so these data sets are going to be put together and made available to the developers of various technologies in order for them to be able to train their neural networks so that subsequently, on a competitive basis, such services could be made available. So the main focus here is to transit from strategizing to practical application, put an emphasis on data. Of course, the question here is about the availability of various capacities in order to be able to process all of it. So there's a whole set of ideas about how we should promote the development of this industry, our own processes, as well as while our own processes are being organized to utilize the outsourced foreign solution. So there's a whole set of measures, and I do say that it would transform itself into a very specific plan of action. So the President gave us a task in 2025 to relaunch our national program, which is digital economy. It has a different name to it already. This is going to be national data-based economy, so the emphasis here is upon the data. And so very shortly, and actually at another strategic session, we will dive into the contents of this program, and the national projects will discuss core measures and funding, certain regulatory mechanisms. And as of 2025, it will start, and throughout 2024, we'll be preparing to launch it. So I believe there's a whole set of decisions that have been made. So good speed only. Well, all right, thank you very much. But what will be the data protection here? Because a human being like myself to share my information with some mysterious AI. So how are you going to deal with the customer data protection? Well, this is a very basic issue. In order to improve our services in the public services, we're always trying to gather the maximum amount of data in order to make sure that all of the forms are convenient to fill. We have proclaimed a different approach in the government services. We're going to try as much as possible to get rid of the floating data. We will switch into a government agency own a front window available through the electronic interaction. The basic principle here is that they learn to very quickly share the data, and so switching in between various tabs in the government services portal by clicking in your personal account respective buttons will make it very quick and easy. And that's how we're trying to get away from the points of big data concentration in a single place. We'll have a very strongly distributed system, anticipating that the basic data will remain within the government agency perimeter. We will simply apply different regulations and requirements upon its availability. And the data quality? Well, the front window is a rubber stamp kind of a solution that is part of the government technology. And so the basic, how to make sure that the data is clean and good quality, and so that all the windows are synchronized in order for all of the data to be on the same page, so to say, and that poses a separate technology challenge. Will we have enough computational capacity available? In the meantime, yes. Thank God. I really love to talk about it. Last year, there was a lot of doubt in terms of access to the servers and hardware. So our services really were able to make a step change. So more than 50% of the hardware equipment comes from the Russian manufacturers who are able to reorganize their logistics through the subsidized lending from the government, which took place on a large scale last March. So we don't see any major risk. Without doubt, there are certain difficulties with access to the most sought-after kinds of equipment in the area of AI. But overall, we do ascertain that these things are being solved, although, of course, the cost has grown strongly. Thank you very much. Sergei Semyonovich, a question to you. The city of Moscow is an acknowledged leader from the point of view of digitalizing the whole of the urban environment, and is a leader in terms of the level of the development of the digital services. And you are implementing the smart city concept, setting the trend, I should say, in this area for many, many other cities and towns throughout Russia. We all know that in Moscow, AI is already in public transport, education, healthcare. What are the specific tasks that you set yourself over the next few years? What will change? What is it that we should be looking for? I mean, the Muscovites and then the rest of the people across Russia. So what do you believe is going to develop in the first place? Good afternoon, Mr. Shadaev. We no longer have the problem with the quality of data and the quantity of the databases. So already at the level of the city itself, we can realistically implement the kind of technologies which may not necessarily be available throughout the whole country. I mean, the data quality is something that still remains, because it is not only comes from what the regulation defines, but also from the overall readiness of the whole system to produce such objective data. When we were fighting against the pandemic, we were able to see it with our own eyes, that an enormous amount of data which was loaded into the federal systems not always were correct, and because of that we couldn't make adequate decisions, or were making a lot of errors. Of course, this is a very basic story in as far as the application of AI is concerned. The city of Moscow has processed billions of photo images over the past few years, and the quality of facial recognition and automobiles has reached 99.8%, so practically 100% recognition. For example, processing 1 million of images of CAT scans, on average, produces the correct kind of diagnostics in an area of 96-98%, while within 30 nosologies it has 100% detection, which means that human being doesn't have to be present there, because when it's more than 98, that would mean that physicians may make mistakes, but machinery produces 100% correct solutions, and that makes it possible to automate such processes completely without an involvement of a human being. And so based on that, I could say that we're now approaching the next stage of the digital development in city and service, city service management. For example, from the point of view of city development and planning, we began with BEAM technologies, which is designing individual buildings in small districts. Today, we have given ourselves the task, by applying AI, to use the major city enclaves development comprised of different designs and projects which, one way or another, are all interrelated. And so, bearing in mind the fact that Moscow annually commissions 12 to 15 million square meters of real estate made up of different categories which require engineering connection at different times, with different capacities, with different purposes. Dozens of sectoral systems related to sports, education, healthcare, transportation, urban development, in order to be able to properly project the urban development, create a digital master plan that is non-existent in the world. I mean, there is an individual planning for a certain district in terms of the development or redevelopment, but for an urban environment, once we set ourselves this, I believe that towards the end of next year, we will be in a position to claim that we already have such working tools. And of course, one of the most sought-after stories of where an AI is applied, trying to respond to a human need, it is healthcare. And at this point in time, looking at it through the big data, we have digitalized almost all of the patient records in the whole city, even those who are visiting our municipal clinics, private kind of clinics, but the ones that are connected to the compulsory medical insurance service. And the patient medical records, as far as pediatric cohorts are concerned, 100% digitalized. The senior age groups are catching up as well, and the quality of the data is very, very high. Also, an individual can fill the digital medical record with his personal data, like a diary, and so today we can introduce such technologies as a preliminary diagnosis, when a doctor can offer a preliminary diagnosis in order to direct a patient to various analysis and tests. More than 70 million. And so this autumn we have switched over not to preliminary but the final diagnosis on the basis of diagnostic at-hand data as well as the medical record which is stored in a digital patient record. And so I would say that throughout the next 12 months, all of the general practitioners will switch to the final diagnosis system, which is using AI, which doesn't mean that the physicians are going to be separated from the process because the quality continues to require additional improvement. 87% in terms of the precision of diagnosis. But this precision comes not as much from various drawbacks in the decision-making mechanism, but rather from insufficiency of information. But as we go further, information will be accumulated, and the machine will learn very quickly. And so towards the end of next year, we will achieve the level of 80% of precision and will improve further and further. In some of the nosological areas, the precision is much higher. So longer term is going to be a human twin when we're going to diagnose following not the conditions becoming severer, but being able to predict the future of the course of a condition on the basis of the big data and a deeper understanding of various processes. And this is no science fiction. That is our very near future. And of course, this is one of the areas where we are going to much further improve the quality of healthcare in Russia and elsewhere in the world. So our task is not to lag behind, but rather be in front of whatever this central healthcare system may allow us in terms of the big data and the big systems which make the big city operate. In the area of education currently, the Moscow Digital School contains a gigantic amount of data in terms of the data traffic, curriculums, which make up the biggest information flow amongst all of the existing information system, which already today enables us to create many good things in terms of the tracking of various exams and written tests involving both teachers and school children. But today we already work on making sure that education is very much individualized per every child and student, meaning that the tasks that an individual should work on very specifically matches the needs and aspirations up to a standard and even above. And that is the kind of thing which is absolutely feasible. Today we're working with the Ministry for Digital Development, the Ministry of Education, and are introducing this system not only in Moscow, but also piloting them in other Russian regions, putting together a joint project under the name of the Russian Electronic School. In healthcare, we are actively cooperating with Sberbank, trying to look into the matters of not only machine learning, but also of generative AI, which might enable us, not might, but I'm sure will enable us to find much quicker solutions. So that is definitely about safety and security. And Mr. Shadaev also referred to that today, realistically, the security systems made it possible to tangibly reduce the apartment robberies and car stealing, and by whole margin reduce the traffic accidents. And that is the contribution from new technologies. I can really run a long list, but I simply would like to say that we are standing on the eve of the next stage of technologies, which would be deeper integrated into the urban environment, producing more effective outcomes. Thank you very much, Mr. Sobyanin. Could it be that another aspect of this whole development is as follows. You mentioned amazing automation, precision in diagnostic technologies, and the automation which is displacing workforce. But in terms of the labor market, what would you say? What needs to be done in order for AI to truly develop human development? Maybe certain occupations are not going to be in demand, including in Moscow. Do you see this as a problem in the immediate future, or should we rather consider this being the problem of a distant future? And there are no threats like that imminently, considering low unemployment and HR hunger and demographic problem. Maybe that will help us solve the problems with labor productivity. Well, AI and its risks today are not inside this country. This country is in the mode of very tough competitive development. And so there has always been this issue of survival. This country cannot afford to be weak. It should only try and be strong and competitive. And so the previous generations invested enormous national resources into the system of security, creating nuclear and thermonuclear security systems. A significant amount of economic product was dedicated to it. And so AI today poses the same kind of challenges, the same kind of technologies, which are going to be applied in conventional weapons, nuclear weapons, in the highest possible technologies and information wars, which is already taking place. The missiles which are flying towards us, they're being guided in a certain part by AI, which today is already killing people. And with the development of AI and information wars, hot kind of wars, our survival shall depend upon how competitive we are. And that is what we need to think about, rather than AI is going to be smarter than we, and tomorrow we're going to become its serfs. Let's first become competitive in the world, and then think about whether we should fear it or not. Today we should fear external challenges, and this is problem number one for today. And of course, the world, in many ways, will be diversified today, not only from the point of view of the development of physical technologies, but also intellectual ones, including AI. So you've put it very correctly. It's all about very tough monopolization of such technologies. I think you know this thing. It's quite obvious when Iran was trying to produce nuclear technology. So what is happening? Missiles are being thrown at it by every Nick, Tom and Harry. So if you don't have sufficient protection, the same thing will happen to you if you don't create your own security and protection. This is not some kind of an imaginary competition. This is a very real kind of a tough competition. We must be aware of it. Well, yes, indeed. I think we're in for a very, very hard kind of competition in such areas. And maybe from this viewpoint, monopoly inside the country, and we are talking about competition inside this country to be able to compete in the external market. Well, I mean, you shouldn't allow for the competition to become stronger in Moscow beyond what is appropriate. Mr. Gref, you are known as the champion for the broad application of AI, not only in business, but also in the public service area. And you're already actively applying AI in the whole of these Sber's ecosystems. Recently, you've introduced a big language model, GigaChat, and so how Sber became such a prominent player in the generative AI? What are the purposes that you are using it for? Or is it just you trying to look into the future? Or maybe you're already actively using it. How can this impact your business model and your general plans to develop your ecosystem further? Yes, and Mr. Sobyanin here mentioned tough competition. Maybe you should also say a word about a tough competition in this area. Is it there? Do you feel it? How does it manifest itself? I'm sure that we'll be interested to hear this from you. Thank you very much for your question. If I may, I should speak about what we do with AI in a broad terms, because we conditionally have split our whole effort over AI into 3 stages. The first one, when we basically started working on it in an active approach, that was 2012-2013 up to 2017, which was the delivery of the basic processes, when we're trying to think about how we can use AI actively in our processes. Now, throughout 2018 to 2022, that was the period when we were actively investing and building AI into our whole business. And the main metrics was for us to develop the situation when 100% of customer journeys have AI built into them. And basically, by the beginning of 2022, what we had was almost 86% of all of the customer journeys in Sber had the inbuilt AI. In 2022 happened what happened exactly 12 months ago, in the end of November 2022. A small company, OpenAI, announced a new breakthrough. But basically, they didn't do anything much of a breakthrough apart from one thing. They changed their approach. And that was when basically a new era of AI started. That forced us to seriously reconsider our whole strategy. And so it was almost yesterday when, at our advisory board, we endorsed our new strategy, which is radically different from everything that we have been doing so far. It is erected upon and around the human-centric business development, and with the task to develop a human-centric company, which is a bit of an unusual thing, because we had a lot of debate with our advisory board. We had 4 strategic planning committee sessions under the auspices of the advisory board. We have a very professional and strong advisory board, considering such fact that there was a lot of criticism voiced, but eventually we arrived at a consensus and the strategy was adopted. But of course, throughout 3 years, which was the period for planning such a strategy, it was impossible to implement what we call a human-centric organization, a person-centric organization, because there's a lot of people who are talking about it in the world. But in the first place, this is a rhetoric which applies to the public entities, nations and cities, but not a single commercial company has been able to announce that it has fully implemented it. I believe that we're going to be the first one, and we will collect all the bumps and hits along that journey, but nevertheless we've set ourselves this super ambitious task, and that is exactly something that drives the whole team forward. For example, I will give you a case. I think Mr. Sobyanin mentioned healthcare, and it is exactly the best way to demonstrate it, because we're always saying that AI basically the traditional AI made it possible to create a patient-centric approach in healthcare. The generative AI, not only it has opened our approach to general intelligence, developing the common AI, something that could have been irresolvable. Our president announced it in 2019 during the conference that Sberbank held about AI. A lot of criticism we heard then that such serious things are being discussed at such a higher level that was not serious. But 12 months down the road, everybody started talking seriously about it and saying that in between 2030 and 2040, this is something that definitely will be done. Previously, we heard that it could be done only by 2060 or 70. Now, what makes the difference between the human-centric approach in business and patient-centric approach? The patient-centric approach means that everything revolves around a patient. A patient comes to a hospital and very quickly gets good quality healthcare. In Moscow, currently, that has been already achieved at a very high level, so one should definitely grant Moscow that it's really moving in big strides towards such a result. And so everybody is following Moscow's suit. Recently, we went to the Sakhalin Island. There, the authorities have done so many good things in improving the local healthcare system. Now, the human or person-centric approach is measured in a totally different way. The biggest objective is how one should do it so as not to turn a human being into a patient. And the basic and the topmost KPI, whether a person has become a patient or not, that changes an approach radically, changes the motivation that the doctors are following. Let me not hypothesize on it further, but this is a super difficult task. But considering the current technologies, including the generative multimodal big data solutions, this technological foundation is ready. The models are not yet ready themselves, but the basis is there. I don't know, maybe 3-5 years are required in order for us to implement it fully, so we must not lag behind. And so I believe that in this area, there will be a radical change applied to the business models that all companies follow in the world. And of course, that, amongst other things, and in the first place, applies to the fintech and financial sector. So the last stage that we're currently going through, 2023 plus, that's what we describe AI as the foundation of the business model. And of course, that changes very strongly everything that we've been doing so far. And introducing traditional AI, we've got great benefits. For example, we're the only entity in the world which is capable of issuing a loan for legal entities on the basis of everything that is being done by AI. We've got a compliance officer in the form of AI, and so it takes just 7 minutes. So today, almost 60% of all the loans made available are made available without any human involvement. That doesn't apply yet to such products as project finance and so on and so forth. But whatever we describe as plain vanilla thing is being done just like that, up to 60-70%. And then we're aiming for 100%. Mr. Gref, indeed, you've been applying traditional intellect for so many years, but generative AI, how are you going to switch it into the business model? Well, thank you very much, but let me just finish with just two things. As far as healthcare is concerned, Mr. Sobyanin, I think, was very shy in telling us what he's doing, because whatever the city of Moscow is doing has a radical, important meaning for the rest of the country. For the past 5-6 years, Moscow has done a lot to purify the data sets. 4 billion of them. We are collaborating with Moscow very strongly. And these sets have been made available to us to work on such a thing that introducing 3 diagnostic journeys. And that has been introduced in all of the Moscow clinics and hospitals. So an enormous job has been done. About 12 million diagnoses have been given last year throughout the previous years. And that made it possible to develop the next level of modeling. AIDA was the next one that was introduced as of September this year. And that is where there are about 86 different diagnostic journeys which cover almost 75-80% of all of the patient calls in the clinics. But as of December 1st, there will be the model with 355 of them. And that is a radical change. When we were trying to make an inway into the healthcare system, there was some very interesting experience. Almost a month ago, a female patient came to our section, to our department, and the client manager saw that she was very upset and very nervous, and she was talking over the phone, complaining that her baby had a fever. So the manager asked her, "What's going on?" And she said, "I've got two-year-old baby, and for 2 weeks in a row, she's running a very high fever, and the doctors cannot properly diagnose what is the problem with the baby." So she immediately connected her with Sber Healthcare, the division of our bank. They uploaded all of the tests there, and using AI, a diagnosis was made that 80% probability is that it was the Kawasaki syndrome, which ends up with an fatal condition developing in the baby's organism, and that just several days were left for the baby to remain alive. So the recommendation was to immediately go and do the CAT scan, and the immunoglobulin was applied as a result of it. And so the baby was saved against the situation when just 2 days were left for the baby to stay alive. When such situations happen, that stimulates the whole team. Even if one life can be saved, it means that all of the money that we invested into this particular solution are justified. But again, it is only possible once such models and infrastructure, yes, they are important, but when you don't have pure data, particularly in healthcare, it would be impossible to do it. And so this kind of collaboration with the city of Moscow government is the key one. Now, as far as generative models are concerned, we are now switching everything to generative AI, including the new generation, like Mrs. Sobyanin mentioned. Yes, already big linguistic models and generative models are in the base of that. That will take a few years. I mean, to complete it 100%, particularly to achieve the necessary level of precision in healthcare, that is indeed very crucial. But we do see a colossal benefit in that. Well, certain experts see here in the room, Vladimir Kulik. He is one of very experienced experts in risk management. Our models were working very fine. Our Gini, jumped up almost 20 score points, when before that we thought that would be impossible. In as far as NPL is concerned and the cost of risk, these markers are going down. Now, what Mr. Sobyanin said about the open AI, that is the notion that is being described as closed AI, because Musk in his time organized this initiative to bear the gift of AI to the rest of the world. But currently they're closing everything down, and the whole world is bidding about it without disclosing the tunings and the settings. Of course, many countries are not going to possess AI. It is going to become a closed club. And so in this sense, a proposal has already been made that such an AI can be taught only in special data processing centers. And all of these data centers are well known throughout the world. And so a proposal is going to be made that all those who are not take commitments and obligations to follow the rules of such learnings, to send the missiles over there and bombard those data centers so that they should stay compliant. I think it's really great to see that this country is going to possess at least 2 instruments, the Yandex-based ones that we have, and whatever we see, all of it, I mean, it is already being made available for public use, and I think that it is critically important for all of us to work for the good of the market. And so in this sense, it seems to me that all of the Russian businesses, without exception, will be given access to it. And so it is great that there is a competition between ourselves and Yandex, because that would make the ultimate model become better. We will definitely make it into the one that will be able to compete with everybody successfully in the first place with the United States. So the future is a very good one, and the financial sector, quite obviously, is a well-advanced one, and I think that would prompt the development of the whole of financial sector, because we've got a dozen very innovative banks which are able to successfully compete against each other. And so in this sense, I don't think that competition is going to make us suffer. On the contrary, I'm sure that we will be really gaining momentum and more ground. Well, further on the topic of competition, my question to Mr. Kostin. A year ago here at Finopolis conference in 2022, you compared bankers with restaurant waiters who must service their customers quickly, well, and expensively. Doesn't mean that chatbots are going to provide such a service, a good service, and cheaply. That was my response to question you. But many of what you utter are saying that the AI is not going to substitute the human being with the humor, like you are demonstrating, with human intellect and feelings. Well, there is a bit of a skepticism that I can read in what you're saying towards AI, because I can see that introducing AI became part of the B2B IT landscape transformation. But nevertheless, where do you see a broad application of AI? And maybe a more global kind of question, whether AI can change the rules of the game in the Russian financial market and generally in the global context. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. I would like, nevertheless, to begin on the topic of competition and congratulate my competitor and my friend and colleague Herman Gref with his re-election for the new tenure of the head of Sberbank. I believe this is an important event not only for Sber, but also for the whole of the Russian banking sector, because Herman is always raising the bar so high that all of the competitors have to really jump as high as possible, not to lag behind. That is what we're grateful to him for. And I would wish to Herman to always be the leader, because, as I said, that really benefits the whole of the Russian banking system. So, being the kind of person who, in terms of one's age, spent his childhood reading the science fiction writers, because that was the period of space development, and so we had a lot of books made available to us, Russian science fiction writers and the foreign ones, and the artificial intellect then was represented in some sort of a metal jacket, or and then when I started Marxism, the Marx-based future political model also reminded AI in a bit of a way, because he was saying that people are not going to work hard because they will do more of a creative work. But the everyday run-of-the-mill is going to be done by developing productive forces in different ways. So I guess that we have approached the kind of a stage where we started mustering at this stage this infamous AI. And I believe that this process is something that one can like or dislike, but it is taking place and it will continue doing so. And there is no getting away from it, no matter what we want. And so I believe that the banking industry, its use of AI, will pose one of the most important competitive advantages, specifically as far as the financial structures are concerned, who will have the capacity to achieve it, while the rest are going to either die off and become the matter of the past. So we have truly come to the era. I recall, that famous childhood movie, The Adventures of an Electronic Boy. So the happiness was described in that film is where people don't work, they create. And so, as I was saying during the last year's conference, quickly, with good quality, and maybe not so expensively, if we design and construct it in a good way. But in as far as not expensively is concerned, I want to say that we have to invest big money into modern technologies, including AI. Our budget next year has 160 billion of investments, and to a very large extent into AI specifically. And so I think that the rest of our colleagues, if not more than have such funds allocated for this on a comparable level. And so I would like to respond with a question to the question from the Central, because all of these investments are considered to be non-tangible ones, and so we need to somehow continue investing into it, and so how it is going to be accounted for. Going back to the Basel principles, because the supervisory authority in Europe, which is believed to be suffocating the future of the banking system, offers a term of 3 years, something that we haven't been able to get from the central banks. All right, we'll start moving towards the city of Voronezh. Well, definitely, this is something that has come up. Yes, so in the meantime, it's going to remain expensive because we need to somehow recoup such investment through quality. So the formula remains as it used to be. But in the future, definitely, we will try to make it cheaper, like Mr. Gref used to say, and even today he mentioned that Sberbank is making now more than it spends. We haven't yet reached this particular capacity. We are continuing to invest, and the process is rolling on. Today, certainly, many areas are already covered by it. This is the retail business, brokerage and asset management, where we are introducing AI more speedily. And like Mr. Gref said, that the corporate business is going there. But in my mind, we are still going through a weaker phase. We're just starting to pick up pace towards a stronger phase of AI, like Mr. Gref said that they were the first ones who created the linguistic systems, which is the next stage, next step. That is what we're going to go for. But currently, I wouldn't really mind any sort of risk that would create a serfdom for us. I mean, technology, and I very much agree with Mr. Sobyanin, irrespective of all kinds of London-run fora, and in the current world of conflict, to achieve some kind of a global regulation of the rules of the games in this area, it would be like in the nuclear energy sector. We have created it, but it is being limited for the civil purposes in a very limited way. I mean, and primarily in Russia, we've got nuclear energy production, we've got nuclear-powered ships like the icebreakers who traverse the spaces of the Atlantic Ocean. But throughout the rest of the world, whenever we talk about nuclear energy, it's more about the nuclear weapons. You can consider it to be a weapon of containment, but still it poses a very big threat for the whole humanity. And on the other hand, certainly, what kind of risks? There are certainly the risks that such processes may get out of control. Actually, this is the first human product that we cannot fully understand the decision-making process, like in the joke, when a man bought a robber woman in a sex shop within artificial intellect. He comes back a week later trying to give it back and get a reimbursement, and the salesperson asked him, "Oh, why are you bringing it back?" And the man said, "Well, I'm asking her to give me what I want, and she continues to refuses to." So, you see, so today we need to make this system into a sovereign one, and Mr. Sobyanin was very correct. We need to avoid the kind of an IT industry development when we don't have enough hardware, and that forces us to run additional costs because we have a big import substitution program. The central bank should also take this into account. But outside of being skeptical, we need to develop, we need to move forward, we need to catch up and take Sber over, which is almost impossible, but also try and exclude human errors And in the end of the day, that is going to be the new stage of the technology development, where we're going to come up to have a new systems. And thank God the financial sector in Russia is very well advanced, where we're definitely are not behind the best possible global excellence in the Western banks as well. Thank you very much. Well, definitely AI is not going to displace human humor. Vladimir, Alfa-Bank, further elaborating on the topic of competition, has to compete against the government banks. And I know that you put a strong bet upon technology acumen. You recently stated that the linguistic models like ChatGPT within 5 years may displace routine labor and free up to 5,000 people currently employed in the banking sector in this country. But alongside with that, we understand, and this is something that Mr. Kostin mentioned it, that the development of AI requires some huge resources. So my question is this: understanding that competition is there, that we need big resources, how do you intend to go about developing your own generative models, like in the case of Sber, or maybe you're going to collaborate with other banks? Do you consider, amongst other things, to use Sber's services or B2B bank support, how that may affect your business model? Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Good afternoon. Elvira, thank you very much for this question. With your permission, I will start from a bit of a distance by way of an introduction, because I believe it is important to be able to answer your question properly. In the current environment, in terms of what is going on in Russia, we not only have to maintain and sustain our economics, I believe that we need to strengthen our global economic position, to expand our presence in this competitive world that Mr. Kostin and Mr. Sobyanin referred to, and truly become a global economic center. This is the only way that we will be able to further develop our economy. No matter how unexpected this may sound, I would say that it is AI, to be more specifically generative AI, gives us the real chance to win in this competition. I would even say it better. To me, AI seems to be the basic, if not the only, chance of growing economically in the world and winning in the global competition. Why is this happening this way? Why? This chance is right in front of us. Why? So, the Chinese economy is 10 times bigger than ours, primarily because there are 10 times more people living in China than in Russia. Over the previous 10 to 20 years, the emerging countries have been developing based upon the labor resources. We all got stuck against the number of the labor resources in between the couriers and IT developers, always short of this or that, which deterred our economic development, and current situation has reversed. We always had not enough hands, but more brains, more than what we needed. And that's exactly what we need to work with the AI. Mathematicians, the Russian mathematicians are the best in the world. You know, Harvard University, Xinhua. You ask anyone, everybody would tell you that the best mathematicians in Russia, the software developers from Russia, are always winning in international competitions. Even the schoolboys from Russia, the dot, that is a computer game. AI wins over a human being in a chess game, but not in dot game. And so you don't have to have too much of a brain, but we've got the best ones, and that is what develops the nucleus of AI, and that is our super competitive advantage. Yes, we've got a certain amount of the best brain in the world. If you add on top of it the overall digital background, Russian economy is very well digitalized, from the city services to industry services. The whole country is ready to embrace the new digital ways. This is good news. So back to the question that Mrs. Nabiullina asked, competition between the banks in AI area. AI, there are three stages that you go through. The first one's setting up big linguistic models. The second stage, introducing and implementing these linguistic models into business processes. And the third stage, which is those being used by individuals and companies. And so the first stage is a very, very expensive thing. Very few can afford it. These are supercomputers. These are hundreds of millions, if not billions of US dollars worth of investments. And I'm very happy to say that we've got Sber in Russia, we've got Yandex in Russia, who are going along that trail. If in this country only Sber and Yandex, or both of them, would be able to produce very powerful leading linguistic models in the world, that will be our competitive advantage that we would all rely upon. And the rest of the banks and non-banks will definitely follow suit. Like Mr. Gref said, that would be freely available. That is critically important. So I am not afraid to say that we're not going to really pitch ourselves with some good contribution like Sberbank, so we would be eager to help and work together. The next important stage, building linguistic models into business processes. That is not an easy task. And here, the banks are going to tackle with it in a very great way, because financial sector is the best sector in Russia. It is super digitalized, super advanced. And the banks are the locomotives that are pulling this advanced stage. In America, there are 7 companies which are worth more than $1 trillion. Microsoft, Amazon, Google, etc. I don't want to name all of them. In Russia, there are several bigger banks. We're not just banks. We're not simply fintech entities. We're a realistic big tech in the Russian economy. And we are ready to act as the locomotives, not only for our customers, but for other economic sectors. The whole R&D that we run in building AI into various processes and digitalization is something that the rest of the economic entities use. The central bank, the Ministry of Digital Development are not in the way. They are helping us, and we definitely would be able to manage it. The third stage is utilizing the understanding of the AI. Once the linguistic models are there, once they're built into the business processes, so people in the companies then will have to use it and understand how to use it. And here, objectively, there are so many things that we still have to work on. Starting from the fact that ordinary people don't know very well what it is. Over the past 10 years, we've been talking about financial literacy, that every school person and student, that every household should know what it is. And so we need to now go with this financial literacy, digital literacy into the general public and introduce changes into education. You don't need to train the IT people how to run and develop software. In 5 years' time, that is not going to be in demand. It's like back in the 1990s, I remember, when everybody dreamed to become lawyers or economists. Now, in the middle of 2000s, the lowest paid occupations were lawyers and economists. So you should train IT people not to program with Python. You need to train them in what comes next. And here, taking the opportunity of this high podium, I would like to boast a little bit. One thing is the government initiatives that definitely should take place here. The other thing is our private initiative, which we describe as Alpha generation. There is such a scientific term, Alpha generation, that people who are senior than 2010, we couldn't but try and use this coincidence. So we launched a program, the All Russia program, with several hundreds of educational institutions across the country, where we're going to promote our knowledge and our experience in among the educational institutions. That applies to the federal higher education institutions, such as FISTAC, the Bauman University, and others. Our experts are going to lecture and teach. I think we have Alexei Kashirin. Could you please show yourself up? Our head of the Advanced Analytical Center, the best head of the AI department throughout the whole Russia. Not only Alexei, but people like him with this very high caliber of knowledge and experience. We will go into the regional educational institutions as well. We will try and cover more than 300 of them. We will invest money and time into it, and our very much real artificial intelligence. And that is going to be our contribution into the Russian economic development. Well, thank you very much, Vladimir Vyacheslamovich. Inspirationally said that we have everything that we need and the basis and the inspiration for the development of AI. We don't have too much time left, so I have one question to all of the panelists. Please give me a quick answer. What, in the first place, the government should do in order for Russia to be amongst the leaders in the area of AI? What is the most important thing? I mean, we've discussed many aspects, but what one should focus upon? Mr. Gref, let me begin with you. Well, you know, first of all, a lot depends upon the government, particularly if the government starts regulating. That is why the first and the most important thing is try and not over-regulate this sector. That is the most important thing that the government can do. Yesterday, the central bank published its approaches to the AI policy. It seems to me that there is a very sensible concept, risk-based approach, but avoiding over-regulation at the same time. We do see cases when United States and China use AI, and alongside with it, create all of the terms and conditions for its development without over-regulating. We also witness the European approach, where there is a digital directive, and then the principles of regulating AI, which essentially eradicated the future for the development of AI in Europe. And so many major companies and businesses today are trying to relocate themselves outside of the European Union jurisdiction. So it is crucial not to repeat this mistake. So it seems to me that in the meantime, in Russia, the government and the central bank are very well aware of this and demonstrate very sober approach without any fears, and so we do stand a good chance of passing through this phase. But there are four key things. Infrastructure, like Mr. Shadaev previously mentioned, that we need to build capacities. We're a bit behind the Americans in terms of the capacity availability. So in terms of the data sensors that we have and what we use to produce AI-based models in the United States, there are 2.5 exaflops. So we need to really raise our have almost 2 folds, which is a very serious task. And so the government's involvement here is going to be crucial. And we've actively debated it recently with the Ministry of Digital Development when we have been preparing respective amendments into the strategy for the development of AI in the country. Second thing is academia. We need to develop it. Science and research. That is a very expensive thing because the current inferences cost a lot of money. So, like I previously put it, models are being made openly available, and the inference, meaning to say, the use of them by all the users means a lot of money for the proprietor. And so some very serious research is required to optimize such models. So, for example, since the beginning of the launch of the model, almost 40% we've been able to optimize use it. And so the cost has gone down 40%, but you still need to really bring it further down, to make it cheaper. So yesterday, TurboGPT data was published. They really did a lot of work in optimizing their costs, and so respectively, that produced the price reduction almost 2.5. So availability and accessibility is growing, and so on and so forth. And so research and academia need to be part of it in order to make it happen. We've got the AI Development Institute, which is busy with fundamental research in mathematics, optimizing the models. And the third area, of course, the regulation per se, because experience shows. We've just published the models, and ourselves in Yandex ended up being in the prosecutor's office, because our model, when generating the Russian flag, I mean, it's generative model, so it is trying to make the flag look better. So it put on the flag, on the national banner, the domes of the St. Basil's cathedrals. And so the members of parliament deemed it to be a sacrilege over the national flag. Well, we immediately stopped it. Like the government symbols are no longer being generated, just a picture, just an image in advance that we direct it to. But at the same time, it is undermined in its generative capacity. Over the past 2 years, we couldn't really make available because we were trying to make it more secure. But throughout that, it lost 12% in its creativity and precision. So these are the kind of things that we'll need to pass through as a whole period. And the government help is necessary because, you know, a certain benevolence and understanding of us being like children. Don't be too strong of a judge. Well, I mean, when we ended up being in the prosecutor's office, you know, it was our luck that the person in question was a contemporary one, an understanding, because it could have been otherwise. So the kind of support that we are expecting from the government, that technology is moving in mysterious ways, it won't be possible to do everything without mistakes. And we will track on all the possible whys that there are out there. But it seems to me that in Russia currently there is a very proper kind of an environment. And as I said, no single company will be able to do it. What would we do in healthcare without the government of Moscow? Great, strong support. The head of the cabinet is also looking into it. The president every year participates in the artificial intelligence conference, and that demonstrates the importance from the government level to everybody involved. And so I believe that this kind of collaboration, Vladimir was very correct, that we need to unite, because we will still have to compete against each other, not in creating big models. There are not going to be too many of them, but in the way they're going to be used and applied. And that will be the biggest kind of art, because I believe that the little banks they are faster, they are more agile, and they're definitely going to be doing something bigger than the big banks and faster. Sovcombank, for example, Alfa, VTB, very strong and nimble competitors. They are starting and learning things very quickly. So competition is what makes our industry very interesting. You know, if somebody will become just a single master, will start teaching everyone, I think the interest is going to be lost. So, moreover, we've held a big conference, and as agreed previously with Central Bank, we opened up all of our products, which we previously had never shown to the other banks, which we thought would make sense, now particularly because of the sanctions. So we share all of our products with the rest of the banks. We collaborate very strongly. Mr. Shadaev, yeah, from the point of view of the regulation, we believe it is very important to identify a balance so as to get rid of the barriers which nevertheless exist on the way for the AI to be introduced, but at the same time avoid the trap of excessive regulation, because here things can only be spoiled. Second matter is personnel. Like Vladimir put it, we definitely need software engineers, but we do need a kind of an elite that is going to push everything forward. We need to, graduate 500 individuals a year, the top of the top, who will then push AI as the big technology forward. The third thing, our legal, car will need to connect to your locomotive, and so in education and healthcare and in other sectors, keep on introducing such technologies by eradicating public fear of it. Like the second opinion in AI, it helps to decipher the computer images, and that all improves quality. And in terms of the market, we need to build big government data centers, providing free competitive access to such data centers, so that the software engineers could work and compete against each other to provide such services. Moscow demonstrates a very correct approach. Mrs. Sobyanin failed to mention it. All of the software developers are able to use their technology, and in the competitive model, the one who creates the better kind of a technology for recognition gets paid. Thank you very much, Mrs. Sobyanin. Are you? Yes, a very difficult question it is. 6 people are on the panel, 5 represent the government, and they are saying, well, you go and compete with each other. Mr. Shadaev is saying, what kind of competition do you mean? I mean, the government is up there, you're somewhere lower level, so why should we spread the money so thin? Let's create the vertical kind of a system, and the central bank will say, hey, banks, what are you trying to do here? Let us, the central bank, do it for you, and then you just use what we produce for you. So, well, there is always a temptation to do it this way or that way, and that makes sense, because without different approaches, without competition, even pseudo-competition, and as far as the government structures or quasi-government structures are concerned, there should be work done on a systemic basis, because in terms of the public governance and AI, there is a certain common opinion that the region that has more entitlement and rights is able to demonstrate much faster economic development. Because in the government, there can be just one person who will think that he should be managing everything, but that can't happen that way. We're all human beings, and all of us in their respective locations want to make sure that people have a better life and better future. So in regulation, you should always leave certain niches for competition. Big systems should compete against each other, while the regulator, as much as it is possible, should create such opportunities. Even bearing in mind the certain risks that Mr. Gref mentioned, we must not create ideal regulatory systems. If, for example, we were capable of creating ideal system, and as far as fire safety was concerned, then we would sit not in this particular room, but out in the open field, on the mud or on snow, and that would have been an ideal situation for fire safety. But we are inside a room which may catch fire. There is a certain probability that human beings may suffer, but we intentionally take this risk. And that requires not only technological solutions, but socio-political and economic approaches, when we need to relate human safety and economic consequences and economic opportunities, and not forget about it, because quite often we aspire to reach the kind of heights that not a single mortal can reach it. stifling the economic development in such regulation, like tough requirement placed upon personal data, the area where I had the rest of the planet. You must tread very carefully through such grounds. But as far as regulating AI is concerned, I should say, let us achieve certain leadership position in the world, become members of that club, and then say, let us also regulate it along with you, rather than just give us the will. We'll drive and regulate it. Nothing good will come out of it. So from the point of view of the government, it is very important. Also, it is very important from the point of view of the government, like Mr. Shadaev said, not to sit tight on the big data. I mean, the government itself. Yes, it needs to be depersonalized, safeguarded, but businesses must work with it. Innovative businesses must work with it. Software developers must work with it. Then there will be traction. And there will be a benefit from it, like the face recognition system. We've got 5 to 7 vendors working over that area, and they are being substituted in terms of how competitive they are. So 5 or 7 remain, others come and join them. The same applies to the CAT scan image recognition and other systems. It might be expensive, you might think, for the government to work with 3 to 5 vendors, but they create the kind of competition that the payback here is simply huge. Thank you very much. Mr. Kostin? Well, I'm always, for the government money. You see, it is important, I should say, like we're saying, we've got a lot of national projects, we've got diverse priorities, and so we end up having so many of them that they simply lose any specific clarity. But if we identify certain top priorities for the government, and I would say that the AI should definitely be part of it, then the focus of our attention and funding, well, but even without it, Mr. Shadaev, I believe, is a real hero. Remember how he was everywhere protecting IT people, mortgage subsidized for the IT, then freeing IT experts from conscription. So the government focus should be everywhere, regulation, support, the whole comprehensive system to be put in place. As generally, I would say, just to simply make money available, because I'm already have certain understanding of the manufacturing sector, just to give money is bad, but to place a contract with a manufacturer is good. For example, if the government would offer a contract for low orbital satellites, Sberbank and us will be eager to do it all. Just give us the government order, don't give us money. So the same applies here. If there is something that we believe is so important, the government should be playing a certain part in it, and there's a number of other matters and issues. Not necessarily you need to allocate money directly, but indirect support, like contracts for certain key things, that's what we should do. Of course, it means some really huge investment and funding, like Mr. Gref said, Academy of Science and Research and so on and so forth. But overall, that should become the priority in the development of the Russian economy and society for the forthcoming decade. And we can clearly define it as such, and then everything is going to be all right. Thank you. Vladimir? Well, myself, as an optimistic person, I would join in the call for not or to abstain from over-regulation. But on the specific question that you raised, digital literacy, along with financial literacy, should become a general educational doctrine. It's not a very complex and difficult thing. It'll take some time. But in terms of the specific idea, Mr. Kostin made me think about it, and sorry for infringing upon Sber's territory. 2 days ago, during the AI presentation GPT-4, Turbo 4, have you seen it? If you haven't, make sure you do, because we need to catch up with that. I suggest that we should leave part of our dividends to Sber. I'm not joking. let Sber produce GigaChat. Otherwise, we will lose in this competition. We will be in the tail. Currently, it is very expensive. It requires a lot of spending, and the gap is going to grow. So Sber investors, if they lose a little bit on their dividend, they would gain more on Sber growing on its capitalization as a high-tech digital company. Every major bank is what I would make responsible for some big asset. I will have shipbuilding, Sber will have AI. Like, for example, in Belarus, if you're a bank, you are sponsoring a collective farm on a compulsory basis. One of the secrets of economic growth in Korea, South Korea, is the so-called chipore. That is when the government, to some really cool businesses and conglomerates, has given a specific task to Samsung, LG, in terms of the industry sponsorship and mentoring. Yeah, so the main thing for the government to do is to identify the business responsible for a specific business and set up a commission, and set up a government commission to govern it. Well, dear colleagues, dear friends, let us now wrap up. Thanks very much to all of those on the panel for this conversation. I do hope that those of you in the audience, I'm sure you felt that this is a crucially important topic. At least my feeling from what we've spoke about is that we have a very sober, very common sense attitude towards AI. We understand the future, we understand that there are risks, we see the barriers, we also understand that we have the foundation for the AI development and the necessary steps that are being made. And by the way, what Mr. Sobyanin mentioned was very important. It is crucially important to understand that we are part of a tough global competition. And so the application of AI is the issue of our ability to survive, to compete, and that will define the priorities of the nations. And as far as the government priorities are concerned, and the regulation in the financial area, I heard what your expectations are, and I agree that one should not overregulate. Definitely not. Maybe some of you may recall then when we started many years ago this Finnopolis conference, and that was the period when fintech was just developing. We also selected this kind of an approach. Why should we regulate the risks which yet haven't emerged? I understand every regulator has this temptation. God forbid something will happen. I do know it. But then the threat is that the technology development is going to be curtailed. And the fact that our financial industry is so well advanced is the outcome of our reservation in terms of regulatory approaches. And there is also a consensus that on the one hand we need to concentrate resources and cooperate, but competition should also remain. In terms of the access to big data, without which we cannot sustain ourselves. Also in terms of the government contract in the future. I believe it is also important for the systems which use AI. So, a lot has been correctly stated about infrastructure and personnel. The government strategic session, I'm sure, looked into that, and the plan is going to be updated based on that. So I hope and I count upon our financial organizations and this country's financial industry, as has been in the past, will remain as the leader in using AI. But we will also cooperate with other sectors, because I believe it's not going to be possible without it. If we specifically talk about individual-centric kind of an approach, whenever we talk about a person, then we definitely see that it is very important to make it that way. I'm glad to say that we've started this year's conference with this topic, because you cannot slow it down, irrespective of any fears. So great many thanks to our panelists for making the contribution into this debate.